So welcome. If everybody's just joining us, we have a few minutes until the webinar begins. I'll go ahead and drop the link for the report that we'll be talking about today. Feel free to also use the chat function to introduce yourself. Please say the name, the town and state that you reside in, as well as how you serve children and families. So that could be library, museum, policy, research, etc. So please utilize the chat function for that. Chicago, I see. New Jersey, welcome. Cincinnati, welcome. If you're just joining us, feel free to introduce yourself using the chat function. Say the town and state or country that you reside in, as well as how you serve families and children. And we have about a minute left until we get started with the webinar. Welcome, Pembroke, North Carolina. I actually live in Apex. And we'll be talking about our media literacy and early childhood report today. So I just dropped the link into the chat as well. And it's actually noon Central Time. So I believe Alexis will go ahead and get started.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome everyone. Jenna and I are excited that you're here, and our partners are excited that you're here. This webinar is focused on a Institute of Museum and Library Sciences grant-funded project that we've been working on for the past 2 years. And the title is Media Literacy and Early Childhood Report. Jenna's dropped a live link into the chat that you can click on to get the full report. It brings you to our website that has all sorts of documents. And today we are really excited to kind of go through all of this with you and introduce you to the work that we've been doing. So I'm gonna have Jenna just flip slides. Logistics for this webinar, if you've been on our other TEC Center webinars, these are pretty similar. But the focus here again is really to walk us through this media literacy report that we've published and created. This is going to be about a 30 to 40 minute presentation. Please always use the chat function to chat and the Q&A function to ask any questions. We'll have time, hopefully about 15 minutes at the end for question and answers. We are unable, unfortunately, to provide closed captioning service today, but we are recording this, and we will send out the recording to everybody who's registered either in the next couple of days. Again, because today we're presenting on a report that's published and written by the TEC Center, please use the following APA formatting reference if you are citing any of the material from this webinar or from the report. That's also provided in the report as well, so you can copy it from there if that's necessary. I do want to give you guys a little bit of background about the TEC Center, about why we did this project, about Erickson Institute, so we're all kind of on the same page. Our TEC Center staff is amazing and really worked hard to get this report out. So I want to give them a shout out. Jenna Herdzina is the lead author on this report and was heavily involved in the beginning grant writing for this project, as well as the leading of the forums, which we'll talk about. And like I said, she really was the head lead writer of the full report. Missy Jacobson and Morgan Russo are also members of our TEC Center team and are helping on this project and others. A little bit about Ericsson's TEC Center specifically. We are a center that's housed within Ericsson Institute. We focus on sort of 3 primary areas. We conduct research, we do practice, where we provide professional development, webinars like we're doing right now, and other support services to improve technology use and practice. And we also see ourselves as a leadership space where we convene and create content to help lead the area of technology in early childhood. And I would say that this particular project kind of straddles those 2 roles of practice and leadership. A little bit about Ericsson Institute. It's a graduate school, if you're not familiar, in Chicago that focuses on child development, early education, and social work. So do check out the website if you have more questions about Ericsson specifically. Back to the TEC Center quickly. Within Ericsson, we offer other professional services. So we're offering professional development, especially this summer, around technology use in early childhood, in classrooms and in informal learning spaces, so museums and libraries. We've been offering free webinars either weekly or every other week, depending on the month, on some of these topics. So please check out our other webinar listings if you haven't already. We also on our website offer educator tips and lesson plans. As you can see in this media literacy report, we were very intentional in making sure that we provided not just background and information, but practical uses for how to implement this in your context with young kids. And we also are very actively involved in a number of research projects at the moment. The big news for today is the IMLS grant-funded Media Literacy and Early Childhood Report. And this webinar, like I've mentioned a little bit before, is going to be presented by myself and Jenna Herdzina, and some of our partners will pop in towards the end to give some concrete examples, again, about how to use this report and this information with young children and with families. Today, we're going to go over the grant, kind of give you some background on how we got to this project. We will walk through the overview of the report. And then, like I mentioned, we're going to have some wonderful guests. Dorothy and Tony are going to present some examples of media literacy in action. And then we'll follow up with some question and answers. So do pop those questions into the Q&A section as they come up throughout the presentation. So grant overview, we're really excited to present some of the information about this really impressive and wonderful grant report that we wrote. This grant was funded by IMLS, and it was awarded to Ericsson's TEC Center before I got there. So we have a huge thank you that we have to send out to the founding director, Chip Donahue, and the associate director, Tamara Kaldor, who really did all of the muscle and legwork to get this grant funded and proposed and everything else. This would not have been done without the wonderful, wonderful work and innovation that they had a couple of years ago when they proposed this. So this project was, again, intentional in its creation. It was a partnership between the Association for Library Service to Children, the Association for Children's Museums, and the National Association for Media Literacy Education with TEC Center. Let me tell you a little bit about these partners because it's particularly relevant. ALSC, the Association for Library Service to Children, is the world's largest organization dedicated to the support and enhancement of library service to children specifically. The Association for Children's Museum champions children's museums and supports 450 members in 48 states and 20 countries with professional development programs, publications, and other resources. And namely, the National Association for Media Literacy Education is a professional or association for educators, academics, activists, and students with a passion for understanding how the media we use and create affects our lives and the lives of others in our communities. And Tony is going to present a little bit more at the end about namely more specifically. This grant was written, as I mentioned, to inform, right? To gather experts in this area and to inform everybody about what is going on with media literacy in early childhood. So we hosted 2 national forums, and the first forum had 20 national leaders and the second forum had 20 national practitioners. So I'll tell you a little bit more about those forums. With support from our partners, we hosted these one-day forums. The first was a national leadership forum, which was a forum to discuss the development of the shared actionable definition of media literacy in early childhood specifically. So there's been definitions about media literacy, but what does media literacy mean for very young children? We had 20 national leaders attend this national leadership forum, and we had groups represented from organizations such as American Academy of Pediatrics, the International Society for the Technology in Education, Common Sense, Latino, higher education institutions, Public Broadcasting Service, PBS, and other academic institutions, including University of Michigan, as well as other national leaders in this area. And at the end of the forum, participants made suggestions for how to develop this definition that was aligned with Namely's existing definition. In our second forum, the TEC Center, again with the partnerships, hosted a 2-day national practitioners forum. This happened in spring of 2019 with about 35 participants. We created this wonderful list of invitees who represented a variety of early childhood settings, including libraries, museums, home-based programs. We had a range of geographical locations, so people from urban, rural, and suburban spots, and a variety of demographics of participants as well, and experience working in the field. So we have this great group of very, as you can see from the pictures, excited, energetic practitioners who were participating in this 2-day opportunity to really share their experience thinking about media literacy in early childhood. We can kind of get into the details, but we created these working groups, and this National Practitioners Forum really focused on developing a framework that collaborating partners and other stakeholders could use to support family media literacy education and really broaden the media literacy ecosystem in communities. We had a really wonderful time at this second forum, really digging in deep into what we needed to include in this framework for media literacy in early childhood. So I'm now going to pass the baton to Jenna, who's going to kind of take you through the full report and what we actually came out of as a result of those 2 wonderful forum meetings.
Thanks, Alexis. So I'm going to first just show you where you can find the report on the TEC Center website, and then we'll go through each section. It's quite a lengthy report. It's 54 pages, so I want you all to know what contents are in it and where to find it. So on the TEC Center website, right now, because it's our most recent publication, it can be found on our homepage. But if you go to publications and then reports, you can find it right here. And this is, once my computer loads, the landing page for the Media Literacy and Early Childhood report. So we have a quick introduction as well as links to all of the partners. And then down here in the documents section, you can see that you can download the full PDF of the entire report. So it's 54 pages long, or you can go ahead and download the framework or the Child Development 101 section. We intentionally section it off in different chunks so that you don't have to download the entire report every single time. So that's very handy to know. And then there's also more information about the authors as well, partners, and acknowledgements at the bottom. So that's where it is on our website. And like I said, you can download each of those sections individually. And so our full report. So the intention of this media literacy in early childhood report is to utilize media literacy, child development, and early education knowledge to develop educational materials and advocate for support for media literacy education, specifically in early childhood. This report provides an updated definition of media literacy in early childhood. So you can see on the screen on this slide, we have the definition, and it's in the report. And this definition of media literacy is very specific and appropriate for early childhood. The report also includes an explanation of developmentally appropriate media literacy education for children ages birth through 8, as well as a background on the developmental abilities and expectations of young children with regards to media use and media literacy. And the report also has guidelines to support media literacy in early childhood in general. And Tony from Namely will tell you a little bit more at the end about how about these barriers in sustaining media literacy in general. So this framework is one of the first sections in the report. The framework is intended to be used as a reference point to understand media literacy for children ages birth through age 8. This framework builds upon existing work, including teaching tolerances, digital literacy framework, and Project Look Sharp's process of media literacy. And it encompasses the necessary actions, abilities, and skills that young children must engage in or possess in order to emerge as media literate. It's expected that children will be supported and guided by these adults in their lives, the caregivers and educators, as they develop the skills necessary to master each action. And each of these fundamental actions are critical to media literacy. We also describe each of the fundamental actions in more detail in the framework, describing the skills that may support these fundamental skills. So the next section is Child Development 101. So in order to effectively support media literacy skills for young children, it's critical that we understand child development and how young children experience media. How are they understanding, comprehending media? This section provides a brief background of child development relevant to media use in these 4 selected stages of 0 to 2, years of age 3 to 4, 5 to 6, and 7 to 8. This section seeks to provide a practical overview of child development from birth through age 8 within the context of media use. So specifically, this section has the general development, so you kind of get just a glimpse of what's going on in that age range, and then we have research about the media use and effects during that age range, as well as tips for adults for how to support children specific to that age range. And the next section is the implementation plan. So this resource consists of supporting skills, tips, and activities for the 6 actions of media literacy in early childhood with explicit cultural awareness and considerations. The contents within this media literacy document have been developed by the attendees of the National Practitioners Forum. So specifically during that forum, about 35 practitioners identified the promising practices for the 6 fundamental actions of media literacy in early childhood. These practitioners represented, like Alexis said, many different early childhood settings from across the nation. So practitioners should embed media literacy across curricula and in current daily interactions and practices. And I love this quote by Claudia Haynes, who was one of the participants, and she said, "These aren't lesson plans, they're moments." So in order to implement media literacy in early childhood or with young children, we shouldn't be creating an entirely new curriculum. We don't need to squeeze a new curriculum into formal education. We need to find moments in the child's life, in the child's routines, where we can integrate the media literacy practices. So because practitioners reflect also their culture through their practice, practitioners also need to take into consideration the child's culture while engaging with the child. We intentionally included cultural considerations that are very specific to the 6 actions. And so each action within the implementation plan has the cultural considerations. It also starts out with the definition of the action, the supporting skills of that action, tips for adults on how to support children with that specific action, as well as activities. So we have a multitude of activities for each action, which are labeled for the appropriate ages of children that can engage with that activity, the context that is appropriate for that activity, as well as the supporting skills. And I believe almost finally, there are many barriers to media literacy and early education that are woven throughout a child's ecosystem. So it might be in their immediate setting at a museum or a library. It might be in the training and education of practitioners, or systemic barriers such as policy, research, and societal values and beliefs. While there are many barriers which impact media literacy education every day, there are also existing solutions and opportunities to create these solutions. The intention of the sustaining the work is a twofold. So first, we needed to name current barriers and provide existing solutions, right? We know that there's so many resources out there. There's readings and research and tips that exist already to mitigate or to overcome the barriers, but also we need to inform everyone about the needed solutions, right? What do we need as solutions that caregivers and practitioners and leaders, researchers really need to advocate for or create in order to sustain this work, in order to sustain media literacy education for young children. So this is just a closer look at how in the sustaining the work section, we showcase existing solutions to barriers, as well as the things that are needed to overcome or to mitigate the barriers. And this includes resources, research, or policies that are needed. And then we also included in the report 2 handouts that leadership, practitioners, caregivers can download, print, share. There's 10 tips for practitioners and 10 tips for caregivers. These 2 complement each other intentionally to strengthen the practitioner-caregiver relationship in supporting the children that they serve and raise. And so you can see this is the tips for practitioners, this is the tips for caregivers, and they use very similar language, very similar tips. And I also want to take a moment to again thank IMLS for their support in this project, and our grant partners, ALSC, ACM, namely, for their help in organizing and supporting these two important national forums. And as well as we want to send a special thanks to Lisa Guernsey, Faith Rogo, and Felipe Pena for their help in reviewing and editing this report. And finally, we want to acknowledge and thank everyone who participated in both of the national convenings. And so we have a few minutes to hear about how we can actually implement media literacy. So we have two partners and two people who have participated in the forums that will share with us. So we first have Dorothy Stoltz, who's a librarian who is a media literacy extraordinaire, and she is going to share with us how she implements media literacy in early childhood. And then I'll go ahead and introduce Tony when she is done.
Thank you, Jenna. I'm Dorothy Stoltz with Carroll County Public Library in Maryland, and we use Lisa Guernsey's The 3 C's and strive to activate a vision that Lisa has for librarians, help people develop a framework for making their own decisions. So in libraries, we don't really offer rules of what to do and what not to do, but we encourage families to consider these components that Lisa has thought through: the content, the context, and the individual child's interests and their potential for learning. And we also use Faith Rogo's 4 pillars of practice: modeling, questioning, decision-making, and integration. A cornerstone of our work is that the idea that intelligent curiosity leads to intelligent activity. And as Faith asked in the forum, what parts of ourselves do we bring to a task or relationship? The worried or doubting parts, or the creative, caring, and curious parts? So that was very inspiring. And I do want to say that this report is really fantastic. I think it's going to be practical, but it also gives that rich background for theory. So it was really an honor to be part of that. In 2018, we conducted a Maryland Media Mentorship Project, and Lisa was our consultant for that. And it was spearheaded by Harford County Library in Maryland, but Baltimore and Carroll counties were involved as well. And we discovered the value of the mentality if you build it. And we had a situation in one branch in a Maryland library where one librarian used a very traditional approach to story times with books, music, finger plays, rhymes, etc. And another librarian on a different day offering story time, although she used all those same traditional components, she was doing what Claudia Haynes suggested, that we are creating moments of engagement. So she was engaging parents and families by incorporating a tech or a digital media component in each and every one of her programs. So in surveying families, the feedback that we got in the first scenario, the parents loved the story time, but they did not think of the library as a source for answering their questions around new and emerging technology. Whereas in the second scenario, parents indicated that the library was indeed a source for asking questions and seeking support. In the Maryland project, we actually required peer coaching to support the growth of librarians as media mentors. And peer-to-peer coaching and learning increased the confidence of the staff to support the families. Media literacy is interwoven into library programming. For example, we model co-viewing. In advisory, we encourage a family to make their own decisions. And through curation, we offer trusted resources just as we do with printed materials. And my observation has been that the more librarians encourage a common sense approach to the blending of media, the more relaxed and confident the parents become. So it's not that we're replacing books and other traditional media, but rather using technology as a tool to enhance the joy of learning. And then finally, we are seeing in my library, as we bring in more tech-related opportunities for children, such as Pepper, the programmable humanoid robot in the photo, and we're bringing in other things, coding, augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, etc. There is an increased need for media mentorship. My colleague in the orange is Jen Bishop, and her title is now New and Emerging Technologies Manager. So more and more libraries are creating these types of positions to support this overall effort. Plus, in these uncertain times when parents are being asked to provide online schooling support, the role of librarians as media mentors to families has never been more important. So thank you, Jenna and Alexis and Erickson, and really appreciate ALSC and ACM and NAMELY and all the other national partners in this effort. So thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I know, thank you for doing a shout out for the report and saying that it is so, instrumental in sustaining these media literacy education efforts. This report definitely is just one stepping stone to a strengthened media literacy education field in the United States. And I wanted everybody to walk away feeling like they can participate and they can make a difference in sustaining the work of media literacy education for young children. So that being said, Tony Streit is going to take it away. He is a representative, I believe, president of NAMELY, and he'll be talking a little bit about NAMELY and how you can get involved.
Thanks, Jenna, so much. I'm going to switch screens here quickly and start the presentation. Hopefully you can all see that. Really thrilled to be with you today. Again, my name is Tony Streit. I'm the board president of the National Association for Media Literacy Education. I've been on the board the last 6 years. But I'll tell you that my day job at Education Development Center, where I've worked for the last 18 years, I work in early childhood. And so I'm personally really, really excited to see this report and to have been working with Erickson on this. We think it's really an important moment for the intersection between media literacy and early childhood, and hope that the work continues to grow and expand. So I'll share a little bit about NAMELY with you for a few minutes here, and then hopefully we can have Q&A. NAMELY as an organization goes back 20 years. It's been around since 1999, and it was founded by the leading researchers in the country in media literacy. And they were particularly interested in media literacy as it relates to education. And we've actually had a couple of names over those 20 years, but our current name really emphasizes that role of media literacy in education. And you can hopefully see from our mission here that what we're really eager to do is see that media literacy is valued and practiced as an essential skill in all educational settings, from early childhood to college and in between, and even out of school time, a critical time for media literacy to be happening. And we share that our purpose is really to help individuals of all ages develop the habits of inquiry, and skills of expression that they need to be critical thinkers, effective communicators, and active citizens today. And I hope you agree with me that we've been living through times where these skills are so essential to be able to address the pandemic, to be able to understand the protests on the murder of Mr. Floyd are so, they reinforce how much media literacy is necessary. We're excited about the framing of the definition of media literacy relative to early childhood. You'll see in the report that ours is referenced as well. And this has been kind of really our touchstone over many, many years, the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act. And our founding researchers really came together and unified around this definition, and it's been used in many, many situations. But it really is about getting a person to the point of media literacy, new literacy, where they are curious, inquisitive, and skeptical. They ask questions about everything all the time. Their eyes are open, their ears are open. They know that media messages all have a point of view, and they understand that media influences beliefs and behaviors. Again, so necessary today, so much a part of our media landscape, whether it's broadcast or print or social media, that is so much a part of everyone's lives. So where does media literacy take place? Well, all over the place. Obviously, I mentioned before, pre-K through 12, in community settings, out of school, especially in libraries, and it's exciting to see the leadership of libraries in the media literacy space, and in higher ed, both as an integrated component of a course of study or as degree programs and research. But what the challenges are is that there is no real standard model for how media literacy takes place. It really relies on the enthusiasm of individuals who care about it. There's a lot of competition for funding in the space. And there's debate within communities of just how important media literacy is or how provocative it might be. And generally there's a lack of public understanding, although that seems to be changing. I'll say that in the last number of years, membership in Namely has grown exponentially, 10, 20-fold, because of people wanting to see this a critical part of learning. And I should also say that membership in Namely is completely free. Everyone is welcome to be a part of the movement. There are more than 6,000 members today, and we're looking for everyone's voice to be a part of this. Last year, one of the things we did to really move the work forward and build greater understanding was this snapshot, which we really wanted to be a kind of opportunity to better understand media literacy as it exists, as it's practiced today in the United States. And what we discovered is that there isn't a lot of formal training around media literacy. Most practitioners are self-taught. They struggle with outreach to diverse populations, that there isn't necessarily specialized curriculum for different populations, and it's so desperately needed. That the field has shifted away from a focus that historically had been cautionary about violence in the media or advertising into areas of news literacy and information access, and certainly misinformation today. That there's lots of resources out there, but they're not organized in any particular way, and people don't necessarily have the time to find it all. And there's very competing curricular demands, as anyone who works in formal education knows. So the challenge of integrating media literacy, it can be significant. So out of that report came a number of recommendations, and these were informed by our members and a number of researchers who contributed to the report. But in particular, it was the need to expand professional development especially in teacher preparation, to have greater outreach to diverse communities and make media literacy more inclusive of all the voices in our country, to have more research into practice and exactly help us get a better understanding of practice across the country in different settings, to establish an online repository, to disseminate an annual survey to continue this kind of state of media literacy investigation, and to advocate for greater public understanding and policymaking that will bring media literacy into all educational settings over time. So one of the offshoots of that we're particularly excited about now in 2020 is that we have launched a major national research project to investigate practice across the country. We were thrilled to receive support from Facebook to do this. And the primary goals of that are to aggregate existing research on the value of media literacy education, to identify effective methods for assessing quality media literacy education practice, to deepen the understanding of how media literacy education is reaching people of color, people with disabilities, more inclusive of genders, so that we have that broader picture of who's being served, and to really press policymakers to prioritize media literacy education at the district, state, and federal level, because it does come from that kind of push from leaders and decision makers who can advocate for these practices in our schools. Another thing that we're extraordinarily excited about now in 2020 is the launch of the National Media Literacy Alliance. And it started simply as an idea of how to expand our reach about 2 years ago. And we thought, rather than just trying to chase after every educator in the country, why can't we come together with the leading national educator organizations and help in their efforts to advance media literacy within their communities? And so you'll see a range of organizations here representing both academic instruction and various settings, libraries, of course, NAEYC there for early childhood. We are incredibly excited about this effort, and it involves both shared communication strategies, shared conference strategies, and alignment of standards so that media literacy can more easily be woven into all of these educational settings across the country. And then lastly, I wanted to draw people's attention to the fact that there is movement on the state and federal level to integrate media literacy into practice. Media Literacy Now, a member organization of ours that we're very thrilled to partner with, are the folks that track legislation and policies across the country. Their report for 2020 underscores the movement that's happening at the state level, and that's where it really is critical that state legislation prompts educators to integrate media literacy, and Media Literacy Now has identified 14 states that are moving in that direction. But equally exciting is that at the federal level, there have now been 2 bills, one in the Senate and one in the House, that have been introduced at the federal level to fund media literacy across the United States, potentially through a grant program or other means, to really foster new practice in the area. And I think it's driven by this understanding that how we communicate, how we consume media has changed so dynamically that we can't ignore it any longer. We have to find ways that it becomes an integral part of our schools. So this is just some of the work that we're involved in, but we encourage you to join us, to join Namely, and to get more involved, and to press us to help you do what's necessary to bring media literacy into wherever you're working. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Jenna.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tony. And I'll go ahead and go back to sharing my screen and sharing this really exciting challenge that we came up with. So we're excited to see how everyone is going to implement media literacy across the United States with children in so many different environments. So our challenge to you is to share with us a media literacy activity that you're doing in your community. And you can specifically reference, well, one, tweet at us, TEC Center, as well as Media Literacy Ed, with the name of the media literacy activity. So you can utilize the names referenced in the report. Say the town, state, country that you are doing this activity, as well as the ages of the children that did the activity. And please remember to use the Tech Media Lit hashtag and share this before Media Literacy Week. So we're doing this to showcase how so many people with so many different children are using this report and implementing media literacy into their environments. And so we'll choose a few of these activities to showcase during the Media Literacy Week. We'll reach out to you if you are chosen. Please share this challenge with your audiences, with the families you serve, with the practitioners you serve. And right after this webinar, TEC Center will tweet and start pushing out this challenge to encourage families and practitioners to support young children's media literacy skills this summer. So that being said, we have a few minutes for a Q&A, and I believe we have Dorothy and Tony still available. So if you have a question specifically for them, as well as Alexis and I, please put it in the Q&A. You know, people have been chatting, using the chat function, so please utilize the Q&A and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
One question while we're waiting for more questions. Jenna, if you could flip back and share the slide with the partnerships again, or maybe it was do you have all of Tony's slides by chance?
It was Tony's slides, and let me see if I have them somewhere.
So there was a question about whether anyone is partnering with any of the Finnish institutions that are known for implementing work around media literacy and use any of their resources. I don't believe TEC Center is, if I'm correct on our end.
Well, I'll just say briefly that namely is in regular communication with other international organizations or other national associations that have been doing work in this area, and there are many, many of them. There's been some organization through the UN, but a lot of it is just informal collaboration to share compelling practice. Canada, for example, has been a leader for many, many years and has is many years ahead of us in terms of organizing nationally. But I'll bring that to the staff and encourage them to look at the work in Finland, because I've heard as well that it's a good example that we should look to, particularly in early childhood as well.
Mm-hmm. So is that the slide that, let's see, I have a million things on my...
Again, if you guys can post your questions in the Q&A, it might be easier for us to address them. But while we're here, I see another question asking about video recording with kids at home. And this individual is saying that there's some challenges in that some parents are not able to use video recording since they don't have it on their cell phone or their iPad, or not having access to email to submit it or send it back in. Does anybody want to reply to that challenge?
Well, I know that many schools during this time of families paying attention to their children's online classrooms and trying to support that schools are giving out on loan, different kinds of devices and laptops and so on. And there are communities that have efforts that I'm aware of, where they are finding donations to be able to purchase a number of devices, and also the internet connections to be able to support these families. So it's piecemeal, but I think each community could kind of try to pull together to support that through various organizations, through schools, libraries, social services, etc. So just a thought.
Yeah, and I know we get questions like this frequently. We've been hosting a series of free webinars for early childhood practitioners, and they do want to know, how do I serve all the children equally when they have a wide variety of tech access at home? And so, I mean, we've heard of, teachers and librarians physically, driving activities or books to the children's houses. There's so many ways that practitioners have been creative during this time, but I would say there's no just blanket suggestion on how to support every single child, other than just trying to meet the children and the families with where they are at and utilize the tools that they already have at home.
And I'll just add, absolutely, the moment has surfaced all the inequity in terms of technology. But if you look at media literacy going back many, many years, some of the most compelling work was done before all this technology was available. One of our founders created an incredible toolkit that was all in a box. It was cardboard and had activities in it. And when I was teaching many years ago, the way that I would teach editorial voice was to bring a newspaper in, put it in front of the children and say, okay, now you cut out the story that you would have put on the front page. And so you don't necessarily need a gadget to understand media and messaging and its influence in our lives. But there's also a compelling argument to bring greater equity into our schools, so that there isn't one group of children that's ahead and succeeding and another that's behind.
Mm-hmm. And in general, we made sure to, in our report, in the implementation plan, there are activities, that do integrate digital media technologies in there, but there's also many activities that you don't need digital media technology, right? Because media, specifically when we talk about it, is all media, even print media, even when you go to the grocery store, even when you're driving in the car or on the subway train. So media is everywhere. And I see more questions rolling in. Alexis, have
Sure,
you?
yeah. I think one other aspect to think about is, yes, the report is about media literacy in early childhood, but we know that we all need support in media literacy. And so finding ways to support the adults, of course, around the children with things like helping them with how to create a video, how to upload a video, how to share it in a variety of ways, especially if we're doing remote learning, virtual learning with young kids, is something that those practitioners working with young kids have to be also willing and able to do, is to support those adults in beginning to talk about and think about these things in a way that's not condescending, that's actually supportive, because we do see a huge range in media literacy abilities across development, right? 0 to 105. So something else to think about. There was a comment about Common Sense Media and the opportunity of possibly partnering with them or working with them to get the word out on some of these issues. Does anybody want to? We love Common Sense Media.
I would say first, we co-hosted a webinar with them about a month ago on evaluating technology tools and digital media for young children. And they actually have a digital citizenship curriculum from pre-K to 12, which includes news and media literacy. So they do have some resources. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if Tony and Dorothy have collaborated with Common Sense Media, but for Common Sense Education as well.
Absolutely, they're namely members, and they are really the go-to in terms of family support, and have been that voice of what families can do. And I know in our house, rarely have our children watched something where we haven't looked up what kind of rating it gets.
Yeah, and I just want to, there's a question about sharing this information. Please share this. The report is free. It's relatively easy to find. Jenna kind of guided you through there. It's broken up into really wonderful chunks. We know printing 54 pages might not be something that most people want to do, but each individual part can be printed separately. You can do just one-page printouts of the tips, as she mentioned. So do please reach out and share this with families, with practitioners that you're working with. We are very eager, and that's our intention, is to get this out there for free to be used by as many people as possible.
I'm also dropping a link for, what is this, almost a month ago, that I published a blog about supporting families while addressing inequities on the TEC Center website. So I'll go ahead and drop that into the chat, and that has tips for strengthening your relationship with students' families from a strength-based perspective, as well as tips for supporting caregivers as at-home teachers, and some examples of what you can do to help address digital inequities for the families that you serve.
And I was just going to say that in a family engagement meeting that we had yesterday in Maryland, there were some partners discussing how they are having weekly family room sessions so that families can hop on if they're able to, like every Wednesday at a certain time, and use it as a support group getting through the virtual classrooms, any other kind of COVID related issues, just to have a group to refer to, talk about issues, and it to be really safe for the families to have conversations. So this, for example, would be a Head Start organization. And so we're trying to build on that, and having some good discussions around making it more flexible, like predictable for families to be able to jump onto something like that, reliable and safe, but also then to be very flexible for the families, like if they need a second session that week or something like that. And for it to be able to be used with phones, as you know, easy to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. It seems like we've tackled most of the specific questions. I want to give Dorothy and Tony an opportunity if there's anything else you wanted to add in the last couple of minutes before we close.
I also know that there were a few questions, so while I'm sharing my Safari right now, that people are asking about some of the Namely resources. And if you go to namely.net and you go to resources, there are many of the resources that Tony was talking about, as well as community. So I would definitely—
Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I did see one question about parallel play, and I think that's really important, and I know it was underscored in the report, but yeah, it isn't this notion of let's plug all the kids into a screen and walk away. It's really about, and this is true, you know, with teenagers, let alone early childhood, is can the educator facilitate an inquiry experience where the media is a part of that, but not the driver of it solely? Can it be group activity and collaborative and exploring? That it's really those ways of bringing media into learning rather than having media be the sole activity that's so important. And again, in all ages.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thank you. So I'll go back to the challenge just to remind you, and thank you so much, Alexis, Tony, Dorothy, for all sharing. And everybody, I encourage you to participate in the challenge and share with your audiences. We want to see as many media literacy activities and media literacy moments on Twitter with a variety of audiences. So thank you so much. Again, Dorothy and Tony. Yeah, we look forward to having you again in some